Welcome back to the next video. Now that we have studied collections, which are list, set, and map, now we are going to study the enhanced for loops. How do we use enhanced for loops in our code and how they are used when we work with list, set, or a map? So let's go back to the developer console and see this in action in our code right there. In previous class, we created list. So let's create a list of string. I'll call it str list. And we'll initialize this list. Remember, it is very important to initialize a list in your Apex code because otherwise you would run into errors which would be difficult to handle. And let's add a couple of more using the add method. It's not that you can only add two here, but I'm just adding some more using. All right. So now in past, when we studied for loops, what we saw was we were writing for loops like this. So integer I is equal to 0, I less than 100, and I plus plus. This is one way of writing for loops. This is called the traditional for loop. We'll see how we would write this for a list. So let's try that. So first we'll keep an integer, which is integer I is equal to 0. Now, if you do list.size, it would give you the length of your list. If I run this method now, so let's call this dot method and execute, right? So now if you see, we'll get all of these in each single line. If you would just say system.debug strlist, then all of them come in the same line. And if there are more, they would be truncated. But if you do one by one, you can see all of them together. Now you'd say for just doing a debug, why do I need to do this? I can just simply do the debug strlist. You can do it, but in order to playing with bigger number of records, say let's say 200 records or 2000 records, then that's when this thing comes in handy. And this is, basically you don't just need to print the list. You need to look at each value inside the list and then do some business logic on that particular value. Hence, for loops are very important. So this is a traditional for loop, which you would rarely write in your Salesforce Apex code. So what do we actually write? So we'll copy the data type, which is the data type of our list. Then we'll give a dummy variable, and this variable would just be for this particular loop. So let's say we'll call it str, and then we'll put this colon, and then we'll put the name of our list. And that's all that you need to do in your enhanced for loop. I'll just write the rest of the bits and then we'll see how we are going to do it. And here we'll just have to write str. You don't have to write anything else. Like in this case, you have to do get I and all of that. Here you just write this, you click save, boom. Nothing else is required. Now let me explain it to you each thing, what has changed in this enhanced for loop from this traditional for loop, and why using enhanced for loops are way better than using traditional for loop. So first thing is, if you recall traditional for loops, we had three things. So one was the initialization of the variable, then until where your loop should run. So that was the exit statement. And then we had an increment. So what three values: initialization, exit statement, and increment. Three things are there. Any kind of loop in any language would have these three statements definitely there. Now, when we come to enhanced for loop, what do we see here is we have a variable which loops through all the loop, like the iterator that we call it. So we have the iterator here. So we have the data type of the iterator as well. But in this case, the data type was an integer. And because we had the exit statement based on that iterator, in here, we don't have the increment or the exit statement. So how does our enhanced for loop handles that? So exit statement is this only, but it runs till the for all the values within inside this particular list, right? So if it has 100 values, it will run 100 times. It has 1,000 values, it will run 1,000 times, but you don't need to bother about that. Enhanced for loops automatically handles that. And then you don't need to do the incrementation as well. That would also be handled. So hence, these are way better, much easier way to write, more easier to read, and causes less errors as well, because sometimes when you do a loop inside a loop, then you lose track of the iterators, or you miss incrementing them, and then you would run into errors. This for loop is enhanced. It handles all of those problems automatically, so you don't need to worry. You just use the correct iterator with the correct data type, and boom, that's all that you need to do. So let's see the values. I'll just highlight here that it is coming from the enhanced loop. So I'll just say I am from enhanced loop. And that's the sole reason why it is called enhanced for loop, because it handles your looping way more easily and way more in a user friendly manner. So you see the difference. The output is coming out the same. It's just that the way it is written here, it's much more simpler, much more easier to read, less things to worry about. So that's how you loop on list. Similarly, in the same fashion, we can loop on a set as well. So how do we do that? We create a set. We'll call it set string, and let's call it str set. And again, we'll initialize, so set, and then we'll call it string. And let's add values manually here. I'm just copying and pasting here, and I'll just put these values here. Now, if I run my for loop on this particular set, so what we are going to change here is we are just going to change the variable name from str list to str set, which is this variable, and rest everything remains the same. Now you would ask this question that the iterator here is str and iterator here is also str. So how does this value change? So this particular iterator is limited inside this block of statement. The moment you come out of this block of statement, this variable is gone from the memory, is flushed out of the memory. So we can use the same variable name again for our next for loop. But if this for loop is inside here, then we cannot use the same value. I'll just save it. I'll run it again, and let's see what the output is this time. See, here again, we have got these values. So, that's the difference of, using enhanced for loops. Similarly, you can use it in a map as well. Let's look at map, because maps are a little different. So let's call it string and string. And then we'll say, let's call it str map, and we'll initialize it. So we'll call it string, comma this thing, that. Yeah. Now we are going to put some values inside it. So how do we do put values inside it? We put values using put in the map. So let's call it 1. And this time the trail maker. Because we have used string as our data type, we have to put everything inside single quotes, because that's how you make a string in Apex code. Now I'll call Himanshu. Then we are going to call one more, and let's call Hina. Now, when we come to for loop here, so again, we'll use the data type. Now, in this for loop, you have seen we can just have one data type at a time. Our for loop, but our map has two data types. So how do we handle this? So there are two ways of running through it. So I'll just put here, I'll put key, and I'll put this as, so my iterator name is key here. And then I'm putting the map. If I just put the map here, then it would throw out an error and it would not let me save. So if I'll just save it now, it would give me an error. See, it says loop must iterate over a collection, but what we are passing here is a map. So what we need to do here is we need to put a dot. So call a method from the map class, and this time we are going to call key set. Now, if we do our system.debug, and this time I'm going to say I'm coming from enhanced map loop, and here we are going to put the key. I'll save it now. And what do you think would be the output of this? So key here is 1, 2, and sorry, it should be 3 here. And the key here is this. So the output in this case is, if I do execute again, so output in this case should be 1, 2, and 3. That's right. That was the expected output we were expecting. So we have got 1, 2, and 3. Now you would ask me a question that if I want to get these values, then how do I get it? So for that, there are two things that you could do. First thing is that we just write another debug statement here, and we'll put our map here. We'll say get, and we'll put the key inside that particular get. So here, it's very similar to what we saw in list, where there you were doing get 0. Here you are passing get that particular key. And we don't know what keys are there. So we are looping over those keys. And each time that key is there, there must be a value against that key. So hence we are doing just get dot key. So now if we do that execute, right? So here you see 1 Trailmaker, 2 Himanshu, 3 Tina. So that's coming out. So that's one way of getting iterating over your values. The other way of iterating over values is, again, we'll use the data type of our value. So in this case, it's string, same as this thing. I'm going to call my iterator as value, and I'm going to put the map name. This time I'm going to use another method, and that would be called value. So now instead of getting key set, and here it clearly says the method also says the key set, and as I explained it earlier, the keys are a replication of a set, and the values are a replication of a list. So hence, if I do this, I'll just put enhanced map loop 2 here, and I'll put value here. Now if I do an execute and do a debug, so here if you see enhanced loop 2, you do the Trailmaker, Himanshu and Tina, the values come through. The previous one we had the key and the value both coming together. Now if you ask me this question, that from this particular loop, is there a way to find key? Then I'll say no. If you need to use key, then you need to iterate over key and then run through this. It's not the other way around. You cannot go from here to here. Why? Because there could be duplicate values inside it, but the key is unique. Hence, using keys, you can get the values, but using values, you cannot go to the key. I hope this is clear. So that's all for this video. Wishing you good luck in your Salesforce journey. All the best.